Question period. I recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan people are struggling with the cost of living, and the Premier and his tired and out-of-touch caucus, the government, have failed to deliver any relief. Last week, every member of that Sask Party government voted against our motion to cut the gas tax and offer families a break. Right. Now, families are earning less, and everything costs more. How can the Premier justify using his majority to block our motion to give families a much-needed break?
Recognize the Premier.
Last week was simply the government ensuring that the government is going to continue to invest often record amounts into our highways budget in the province to ensure that the commodities that we're producing, more and higher value commodities than ever before in the history of the province, Mr. Speaker, have the opportunity to get out and get to market to the 163 countries that we sell products to each and every year, Mr. Speaker, as we are part of the food security and energy security supply chain of the world. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that those very highways are safe for our families that are travelling down them as well.
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
To be clear, Mr. Speaker, families are earning less and everything costs more. Groceries cost more, fuel costs more, even tuition costs more. Tuition at the U of R is set to increase 4%. And I know that students at the U of R sure could use a break on the fuel tax. Why won't the Premier cut the fuel tax and give those students a break?
Recognize the Premier.
Most certainly worked with our post-secondary institutes, in particular the University of Saskatchewan, the University of Regina, on a 4-year funding commitment to provide those institutions with the certainty that they need to provide that very same certainty to the students that are attending there, Mr. Speaker. Currently, as we near the end of that 4-year agreement, I know the Minister of Advanced Education is working with those institutes to renew that agreement into the future. Again, requested by the post-secondary institutes, that multi-year funding agreement, so that they can provide and govern with the certainty, from a financial perspective, govern with the certainty that they need, Mr. Speaker. Students in this province also have the opportunity, once they are complete and working and living and raising their family in a Saskatchewan community, to participate in the graduate retention program. And I would ask members opposite to ask any young career professional in this province if they are aware of the graduate retention program. It's $20,000 in tuition rebate, Mr. Speaker. That comes back to them and their family, Mr. Speaker. It is unlike any other program in Canada. It's encouraging people not only to attend post-secondary courses in our post-secondary institutes, but it's encouraging to stay in Saskatchewan and be part of the vibrant, growing economy that we have here, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that certainty is seeing students at the U of R pay 4% more this year, and no relief from that government. Now, Mr. Speaker, they're not investing in families, they're not investing in students, and they're certainly not investing in our province's north. Now, the Premier, and we've heard this already today, likes to talk about that fuel tax going into highways maintenance. What the Premier didn't mention is that there's a $16 million cut over last year. Now, Highway 123, the only road in and out of Cumberland House, is in such bad condition, Mr. Speaker, that locals feel safer going in the ditch. Why did the Premier cut the Northern Highways budget, and why is Highway 123 in such a mess?
Recognize the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, in the months and years coming out of a global pandemic, there was significant stimulus dollars that were provided, Mr. Speaker, not only to municipalities so that they could continue with the infrastructure projects that they had, but stimulus dollars that were provided to the Ministry of Highways to ensure that we were continuing with construction projects, Mr. Speaker, across this province, including in the north. And that's the reference, Mr. Speaker, $16 million that were provided in stimulus funding to roads in our northern areas of the province. I've been down the highway to Cumberland House, Mr. Speaker, and most certainly does need some work, and Mr. Speaker, is one of most certainly the Ministry of Highways is looking at.
Recognize Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, people are taking the ditch instead of going on that highway. I think it needs more than just a look. But, Mr. Speaker, not only is this tired and out-of-touch government failing to keep our roads safe, they're failing to be transparent when it comes to their deals with their friends and insiders. Let's look at healthcare, Mr. Speaker. When the Sask Party released the contract with the private Sask Party donor for knee and hip surgeries, they redacted the cost per procedure to the Premier. How much are we paying this private Calgary-based donor for each surgery in this sole-sourced contract?
Recognize the Premier.
I don't have that number, and I hope the member opposite or the critic asked that question in committee, Mr. Speaker, where the minister or the ministry officials could have provided that number. What I will say is just this morning, Mr. Speaker, is that our Minister of Health is participating in an announcement highlighting the record number of surgeries that were done in the province last year, Mr. Speaker. How we achieved that record number of surgeries and how Saskatchewan people are experiencing the benefit of that record number of surgeries is because this government does not take an ideological view on how we are providing those surgeries. There are more surgeries happening in our public venues. There are more publicly funded surgeries happening in private delivered clinics across the province, Mr. Speaker. And with respect to the earlier question on Highway 123, what we hear today is really the rhetoric that we've heard out of the members opposite, backing up to the time when they're in government, when they say on one hand, you need to cut the highways budget, and on the other hand, you need to fix this highway into Cumberland House, Mr. Speaker. It just simply doesn't add up when the members of the opposition come to the floor of this assembly, whether it's the economy, whether it's the investment in our classrooms, our healthcare system, our highways, or our communities, Mr. Speaker. It just simply doesn't make sense.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, what we are looking for is value for Saskatchewan people and effectiveness and transparency, Mr. Speaker, all of which are in short supply with that government. We have the longest wait times in the whole country for knee and hip surgeries. And what did we see from this tired and out-of-touch government as a solution? A sole source contract with an out-of-province donor who hired the right Sask Party lobbyist. Meanwhile, patients in this province are left to wait and wait for their surgeries. We see the same thing, Mr. Speaker, with the mammogram contract. How can the Sask Party justify keeping this information that we have asked for from Saskatchewan people?
Recognize the Premier.
Herein lies the difference between the two parties, and this is a choice that Saskatchewan people have the opportunity to make later this year, Mr. Speaker. The difference between a party that was doing less and less surgeries each and every year and a party that just announced today more surgeries done in a 12-month period than ever before in the history of the province, 95,700 surgeries. Speaker, when it comes to health care, you have a party that closed hospitals, fired nurses and fired physicians. You have a party today that now has 19,000 nurses working in the province of Saskatchewan just this year through the most ambitious health human resource plan in the nation, Mr. Speaker. Over 1,000, just under 1,100 actually, Canadian grads that have entered a Saskatchewan Health Authority facility offering services in our Saskatchewan communities, and 225 internationally trained medical graduates also, Mr. Speaker, working with our Saskatchewan Health Authority, offering services to Saskatchewan people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you will see time and time again differences between the investment, over 10% investment that this government is making in health care, and, Mr. Speaker, under the NDP, a government that closed hospitals, fired nurses, fired physicians, Mr. Speaker, and just quite simply had the worst, Mr. Speaker, surgical wait times in the nation of Canada.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, let's be crystal clear about this. That government has the worst wait times in Canada right now. Mr. Speaker, this is basic information about public dollars that the Sask Party shouldn't be afraid of releasing. These two orders in council redact the dollars that are being paid to a private company that has donated $14,000 to the Sask Party. When we look at the contract for breast cancer care, the total number of procedures is redacted. The administration fee is redacted. The cancellation fee is redacted. And the cost per procedure is redacted. We know these scans and biopsies cost less in the public system. Why is the Sask Party hiding these numbers from Saskatchewan people?
Recognize the Minister of Rural and Remote Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to providing care to Saskatchewan residents across the province, Mr. Speaker. We have the most ambitious Health Human Resources Action Plan in the nation, Mr. Speaker. We are taking every measure reasonably possible to address surgical backlogs, Mr. Speaker. That's why the Minister of Health announced this morning a record number of surgeries performed in this province ever in the history of Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to work on the challenges that we recognize and acknowledge across the healthcare system, but we have the most ambitious health resources action plan in the nation, and it is showing results. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, the results are that we have the longest wait times in Canada.
That's right. That's right.
If the minister has nothing to hide, release the numbers. It is that simple. Mr. Speaker, the Sask Party promised to be the most open and transparent government in the history of Saskatchewan, but they have completely failed to deliver on that promise. We have the longest wait times for knee and hip replacement. And when we look at the contract the Sask Party signed with their Calgary-based donor, they're again refusing to release details about the costs. The number of procedures, redacted. Cancellation fees, redacted. Consult fees, redacted. Fees for each type of surgery, redacted. Doesn't this minister think that Saskatchewan people deserve to know how much taxpayers are paying to this out-of-province Sask Party donor?
That's right.
Recognize the Minister of Rural and Remote Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I said, the Health Human Resources Action Plan is showing results, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite talks about wait lists. Mr. Speaker, almost 6,000 more surgeries were performed last year than the year before that. The wait list is trending down with 4,600 people removed from that wait list, Mr. Speaker. Every one of those patients appreciates the efforts, Mr. Speaker. Every one of the patients that have received a hip or knee replacement in Calgary appreciates those efforts, Mr. Speaker. It'd be nice if the members opposite appreciated them just a little bit too.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Just a ridiculous answer from that minister to some very serious questions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these are sole source contracts. The information isn't commercially sensitive. There weren't any other competitors. Saskatchewan people deserve to know how much this tired and out-of-touch government is paying to send people away for basic access to health care.
That's right.
But the fact that they've redacted these numbers tells you everything you need to know about the Sask Party.
Right.
It's time for a change. Why won't the minister come clean with the dollars he's paying to Sask Party donor, and why won't they fix the problems in our public system to bring down health care waits for everyone?
Recognize the Minister of Rural and Remote Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite maybe doesn't understand how this works, but the dollars going to surgical procedures aren't going to any Sask Party donors, as she alleges, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since 2007, 162,000 procedures, publicly funded procedures, have been performed in private clinics. Mr. Speaker, this government introduced the 2-for-1. Mr. Speaker, this government introduced the 2-for-1 system on surgical procedures, and as a result of that, Mr. Speaker, there have been hundreds, literally hundreds of procedures performed that would not, otherwise would not have been performed. Right. Mr. Speaker, over 200 patients have accepted the referral to Calgary for hip and knee surgery, and of that 200, 90 have already received their treatment, Mr. Speaker. Those patients have received the treatment that they needed as a result of the efforts of this government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure you that the member for Saskatoon Fairview knows exactly what she's talking about. I would invite that minister to show an ounce of transparency and release that contract, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. And a little transparency would go a long way with these dodgy donor deals in healthcare. and that would certainly clear the smoke billowing from the tire fire of a deal the Sask Party has presided over when it comes to the tire recycling business in the province. The Sask Party still hasn't released the 2 studies they have that apparently justify this entire mess, Mr. Speaker. One done at the Premier's request, the other done by the TSS, the Tire Stewardship Saskatchewan. We've asked for these studies. The Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce has asked for these studies. Will the minister release them today?
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, the feasibility report that the member opposite is referring to was shared with the ministry with explicit instructions of confidentiality by TSS legal counsel. It was shared.
It's okay. It's okay.
It was shared under the terms of confidentiality and non-disclosure. Any questions regarding this report are best answered by Tire Stewardship of Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Well, Mr. Speaker, at least she has a new script today. Unfortunately, it's not as no more convincing than the last one. Saskatchewan people deserve answers, and they deserve transparency when it comes to this tire fire of a deal, Mr. Speaker. That applies to these studies, one of which was done in-house by the Deputy Premier, I would add. Right. It also applies to the rates that the Sask Party is paying out and charging for tire recycling in the province, Mr. Speaker. The rates that are being now paid to this Newport Beach, California company are apparently top secret, Mr. Speaker. But that's what this whole controversy boils down to, doesn't it? How much is being paid to this company who handles tires in the province? And are those more or less than the fees that were being paid to the Saskatoon company already doing the work?
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, the southern processor in Moose Jaw was done through an RFP and chosen by TSS, Mr. Speaker. The government has no involvement in choosing who is going to, the criteria set out are very specific, and that job is solely the responsibility of TSS.
Good answer.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, she is responsible. Mr. Speaker, like everything else, this comes down to the dollars and cents. These rates paid out for processing are public knowledge in BC, in Alberta. But here in Saskatchewan, they're under lock and key by that Sask Party government. Why is this tired and out-of-touch government keeping these details from the public? Why are they so afraid of shedding daylight on the dollars involved in this tire recycling deal with a company from California?
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. TSS is arm's length from government. They do not run our operation. This is a quote from Colin Fraser, TSS Board Chair. They have an oversight of our product stewardship plan that they approve. We run the day-to-day business, Mr. Speaker. If anyone has any questions or anything about TSS, we're an open, honest, and transparent organization. Colin Fraser. Everything is posted on our website, Mr. Speaker. If you can't seem to find an answer to your questions, please call their office. Thank you.
Good answer.
Recognize the member from Regina University.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Sask Party loves to talk about the federal carbon tax. But what they don't like to talk about, Mr. Speaker, is their own carbon tax, the OBPS. Now, Mr. Speaker, this year's budget includes $280 million in OBPS carbon tax revenue from Sask Power. Right. Combined with the money from last year, Mr. Speaker, that means there will be $568 million of taxpayer money set aside in their small modular reactor fund. All of this pads the Sask Party budget while doing nothing to help families. Saskatchewan people, they hate the carbon tax, Mr. Speaker, but you know what they hate more than that? They hate hypocrisy. So simple question to the Sask Power Minister. How big would the deficit be this year if not for the Sask Party carbon tax?
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I would say that what we've done is negotiate from the federal government to receive the money collected by Sask Power through their customers and essentially repatriating those dollars from Ottawa to Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, that's going to go towards ensuring that we have a clean electricity grant to Sask Power to help keep rates low and affordable for residents, as well as set aside money that's going to go into a small modular reactor fund in the event that we decide to embark upon building an SMR in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. So we really have a choice. The choice is to either have those dollars here in Saskatchewan or allow those dollars to be sent to Ottawa and continue to be spent and decided upon by the Liberal NDP coalition, Mr. Speaker. Which side of that question is she on?
Recognize a member from Regina University.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You didn't hear an answer there, but for members of the Minister's Caucus, the answer is $554 million.
That's right.
Now, Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan families are struggling, and the Sask Party is choosing to take hundreds of millions of ratepayer dollars to pad their budget instead of using this money to help families struggling with the cost of living under this government. These dollars could go to keeping rates low. They could go to cost of living relief. They could go to rebates for households, literally anything else but a slush fund for this government. And you know what families need right now, Mr. Speaker? They need cost of living relief. So why, Mr. Speaker, is the Sask Party choosing to sit on their own carbon tax dollars instead of deploying them now to help with the cost of living?
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, there will be dollars, over $100 million that will be going towards a grant to Sask Power to help keep rates affordable, and that is the plan going forward. Additional dollars will be going into a small modular reactor fund, Mr. Speaker, these dollars have been returned to the province of Saskatchewan, and these dollars will no longer flow to Ottawa, Mr. Speaker. They will stay in Saskatchewan. That is by agreement, Mr. Speaker. The alternative is to have those dollars continue to be sent to Ottawa and allow the Liberal NDP coalition to choose how those dollars collected by Saskatchewan residents, paid for by Saskatchewan residents, be chosen how to spend, Mr. Speaker. Is it the position of the member opposite that those dollars should still go to Ottawa and be chosen to be spent by Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh? Is that her position?
Recognize the member from Regina University.
Mr. Speaker, it's all a bit rich. The Sask Party government rails day in, day out against the federal carbon tax on one hand, while on the other they are hoarding their own Sask Party OVPS carbon tax dollars in a slush fund, dollars that could be used to deliver cost of living relief today. And there's only one party in this assembly, Mr. Speaker, that loves the carbon tax, and it's the Sask Party. At the very least, Mr. Speaker, this tires an out-of-touch government could take federal carbon tax off of people's Sask Power bills and put what we're actually paying on their bills, the Sask Party carbon tax.
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Crown Investments Corporation.
Mr. Speaker, we would love to directly send those dollars back to the people that have paid the dollars, the people of Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, frankly, we don't want the people of Saskatchewan to have to pay it in the first place, Mr. Speaker. The only thing that is stopping us from being able to remit those dollars directly back to the people of Saskatchewan is her leader, Jagmeet Singh, and Justin Trudeau, which her leader over there went to a campaign school to ensure that Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh are re-elected in the next federal election, Mr. Speaker. The people of this province aren't surprised, but what they are, Mr. Speaker, they're just plain disappointed.
Recognize the member from Regina Walsh Acres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Coroner's Service released updated statistics on the number of overdose deaths so far in 2024. In just the first 4 months of this year, we have lost 143 people to the overdose crisis. Mr. Speaker, we know that this crisis disproportionately impacts Indigenous people, both living in urban centres and on First Nations communities. Communities like Fishing Lake First Nation, Joseph Big Head First Nation, Moosomin First Nation, Sakamay First Nation, they've all tragically lost a member of their community to overdose in these last 4 months. When will the minister recognize that his policies aren't working and implement an evidence-based plan to save Indigenous lives today?
Recognize the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, overdoses are a direct result of drug use. And the dangers associated with drugs is something that this government is communicating to the people of Saskatchewan. There is no safe use of an illicit drug, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we are highlighting the dangers of illicit drugs. We are highlighting them through the Provincial Drug Alert System. We have the Provincial Opioid Agonist Therapy Program. We have overdose outreach teams. We have the free take-home naloxone kit program. Mr. Speaker, we'll be introducing community wellness vans that reach out and connect to individuals who are battling addiction. But this government's focus will remain on treatment and recovery to help individuals overcome their addiction, Mr. Speaker. We will not take the path of the NDP and the British Columbia NDP, who have followed the path of making it easier for people to access drugs and easier for people to use those drugs. We will increase addictions treatment spaces, Mr. Speaker, make it easier for them to access treatment so that they can have healthy, safe lives in recovery. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.